So, when you picture the future of cars, what do you see? I'm guessing you're thinking of a sleek electric vehicle, plugging into a wall. And you're not wrong. But the electric battery, as amazing as it is really just one part of a much, much bigger story. Today, we're going to look beyond the battery, at some incredible technologies that could be powering our future, from capturing the energy of a simple stoplight to, and I'm not kidding, literally creating fuel out of thin air.
All right, let's start with a really simple question. You're driving along and you hit the brakes. All that forward momentum, all that energy that was pushing you forward, where does it go? Well, in most cars today, it's just wasted. It literally turns into heat in your brake pads and just disappears into the air. That is a huge amount of lost energy, happening every single time you slow down.
But what if we could grab that energy instead of just letting it go? Well, that's the whole idea behind regenerative braking. Instead of just using friction to slow down, this tech turns the car's momentum, its kinetic energy, into a form we can actually store and use again. It's basically the ultimate recycling program for your car, turning wasted energy into a power source.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll look at how we recapture that wasted energy and dive into a system called KERS to see how it works. Then we'll get a little sci-fi and talk about creating fuel from the air itself. We'll pit these technologies against each other in a future fuel face-off, and we'll wrap up by seeing why there's probably no single silver bullet solution.
Think about this for a second. Every single time a car brakes, energy is lost. Now, multiply that by the billions of cars on the road, all braking millions of times a day. The sheer scale of that wasted energy is just mind-boggling. It's a huge, fundamental inefficiency that engineers have been trying to crack for a very long time.
So, what's the solution? Well, the leading one has a pretty cool name, KERS. It stands for Kinetic Energy Recovery System. If you're a Formula One fan, you've definitely heard of this. It's an entire system built to do one thing: capture, store, and then reuse the energy that's normally lost when you brake, giving the car an extra boost when it's time to accelerate again.
Okay, so KERS grabs this energy. But then what? How does it actually store it? I mean, it's not as simple as just pouring it back into the gas tank. This energy has to be held somewhere, ready to be unleashed in an instant. And it turns out there are a few very different and very clever ways to do just that.
The main contenders are mechanical flywheels, which are basically super fast spinning disks, the chemical batteries we're all familiar with, high-tech supercapacitors or ultracapacitors that hold energy in an electric field, and even hydraulic systems that use compressed liquid. Now, each one of these has its own pros and cons, which of course is where things get really interesting.
Now, one of the most critical things here is stability. An unstable voltage can wear out all your electronics really fast. And if you look at this chart, you can see the flywheel provides an incredibly stable voltage. We're talking close to 100%. That's a massive advantage for making the whole system last longer compared to batteries or even ultracapacitors.
And flywheels have another trick up their sleeve. They can handle just about any temperature you throw at them. Look at that operating range, from a bone-chilling -40 all the way up to a scorching 150 degrees Celsius. Batteries, on the other hand, are pretty fussy. Extreme heat or cold can seriously mess with their performance.
Okay, so flywheels are stable and tough, but when it comes down to the all-important bottom line, actually reducing how much fuel you burn, supercapacitors are the real MVP right now. According to this data, they can slash fuel use by a whopping 40%. That's not just a small improvement, that's a gigantic leap in efficiency.
So, we've seen how KERS can make our current engines way more efficient. But what if we could just leapfrog them entirely with an idea that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction? What if we could create our own liquid fuels without ever drilling for oil? Well, welcome to the wild world of e-fuels. The process is called Power to X. It sounds complex, but here's the basic recipe. First, you make clean electricity from something like wind or solar. You use that power to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. Then you grab some carbon dioxide. You can even pull it right out of the atmosphere. And finally, you combine that green hydrogen and CO2 to create a brand new liquid fuel. You are literally bottling renewable energy.
And here's the amazing part. The fuel you create can be chemically almost a perfect twin to the gasoline we use right now. This chart compares regular old gasoline to an e-fuel made from methanol. Just look how close the numbers are: density, distillation, all of it. This means e-fuels could be drop-in ready. We could use our existing cars, our existing gas stations, our existing pipelines. No overhaul needed.
So we've got all these incredible new technologies on the table, but how do they actually stack up against the reigning champ of the green transition, the electric battery? This is where the debate gets really, really interesting, with some powerful arguments on all sides.
The biggest argument for batteries is just pure and simple economics. As this one Reddit user, Pinewald, put it, with battery prices just plummeting, it's getting almost impossible for any other tech to compete on cost. The financial momentum is just so heavily in favor of batteries right now, and that's a really hard trend to fight.
And it isn't just the cost, it's also about efficiency. When you charge a battery and then use that power, you get over 90% of the energy back out. That's called round-trip efficiency. The process to make e-fuels has a lot more steps, which means a lot more places for energy to get lost along the way. In a head-to-head comparison of energy in versus energy out, batteries just win. But, and this is a big but, batteries have a pretty serious Achilles heel: extreme weather. As this user points out, both freezing cold and intense heat can absolutely wreck a battery's performance and range. That's because the battery has to waste a ton of its own power just keeping itself warm or cool enough to work. That's a problem that flywheels and e-fuels just don't have.
So what does all this mean? It means there's no single, perfect, one-size-fits-all answer. The future of fuel isn't about finding one ultimate winner. It's about navigating a really complex world of trade-offs, where the best choice really depends on what you needed to do.
Here's the central debate in a nutshell. On one side, you've got batteries. They're super efficient and getting cheaper every day. But they're picky about temperature and need a whole new infrastructure. On the other side, you've got e-fuels. They're incredibly versatile, they work with everything we already have, but they're less efficient and more expensive to make right now. You know, what works for a daily commute in sunny California probably isn't the best solution for a long-haul truck in the middle of a Canadian winter.
So maybe the best way to think about this isn't as a competition at all. Instead of asking which technology is going to win, we should see it as building a toolkit for the future. I mean, you wouldn't use a hammer to drive a screw, right? Batteries might be the perfect power drill for zipping around a city, but e-fuels could be the heavy-duty wrench we need for trucking and airplanes. And KERS? Well, KERS is like a turbocharger that just makes any of those tools work better.
And that brings us to our final question. The race to replace the gas engine isn't a single highway heading to one destination. It's turning into a complex, sprawling roadmap with all sorts of different paths you can take. The real challenge and the real opportunity is figuring out which route is the best for which journey. The future of fuel isn't about finding one single answer. It's about having all the right answers for a really complex world.